And welcome in again, everyone, to another edition of the BIS podcast, broadcasting live on the Marvin Network. I'm Josh Green, and today's guest here on the podcast, again, our guests are always special when they join us on the podcast, but our guest today is none other than Connie Rose of MVBA. Connie, thank you for joining us here today, and we're here today on the podcast to talk about Truth in Taxation Matters, or TNT, as it's known as short. And Connie, again, we just appreciate you being on with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome, ma'am, as always. Again, thank you for joining us. And yep, today we are talking about truth and taxation. And first of all, Connie, just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do over at MVBA.
Well, I started working for MVBA approximately 8 years ago, and that was after I had retired from the state of Texas, working with the Comptroller's Property Tax Assistance Division. I am called Director of Education. I am a certified instructor. I teach a lot of tax industry classes. I give presentations, and I've been in property tax business approximately 50 years. So I've had experience as a tax assessor collector, as a state employee working for the state of Texas, and of course now working for the law firm of McCrary, Vestelco, Bragg and Allen. My expertise right now at this moment is truth in taxation, and beginning July 25th until September the 30th, this is pretty much our Super Bowl time, if you will.
Yes, ma'am, I got you. I know it's a very busy season for y'all doing this. So just diving right into it, so far, what has been the number one topic this year concerning the calculations?
Most of my emails and phone calls from assessors or the designated officer or employee that's actually doing these calculations has been questions about the unused increment rate. The forms changed a little bit this year. The formatting was a little bit different. And this was the first time we had 3 years of actual unused increment rates. And it's an 80-step math problem, if you will. And this is a few of the steps within that 80-step math problem. It has been causing some concern. There have been negative numbers that come up, which assessors are going, can we have negative numbers in those spaces? And of course, the answer to that is yes. But the process is a little complicated. It's like a long math problem. So when you change some of the calculations within that process, they do have some concerns. But so far, we've been able to address those concerns and hopefully get everybody on the same page.
Yes, ma'am, indeed. Again, you talked about being a busy season. And again, for some of those that may not know what TNT is, or hearing this for the first time, what is what? How can you best explain TNT season? And also, if someone was doing this for the first time, what is the best advice that you would give someone about it?
Oh, excellent questions. The first thing is truth in taxation in itself is just a phrase that describes the process. In Texas, we have a formula for creating a property tax, and that formula is value times rate equal levy. The values are created by the appraisal district, and their season is from January the 1st until July 25th, and that's how long it takes us to get a certified value. To get the rate, which is set by the governing body. That begins when we get those certified values on July 25th, and it lasts until the tax bills are mailed out, usually around October the 1st. So that rate setting process, which involves the governing body, they have to look at certain benchmark rates. One of the benchmark rates is called a no new revenue rate. Another benchmark rate is called a voter approval rate. And then we have a new rate called a de minimis rate. These benchmark rates guide the governing body to help them decide what kind of tax rate they should propose. And that proposed tax rate generates certain notices and maybe even public hearings, because the public, our taxpayers, have a right not only to question the appraisal district about the value of their property, but they also have the right to question their governing body about the rates that they want to adopt in order to create that ultimate tax levy that taxpayer is going to have to pay. I think the second part of your question to me was, what is the best advice I can give someone who is doing this for the first time? The best advice I can really give those individuals is the first thing I would do is gather all of my information that I need for this process before I even start to work on it. The second thing I would do is grab last year's folder, grab last year's information, and become familiar with the different steps that go in this process. And then lastly, I would probably try to look for some kind of guidebook or some kind of information that would help me with that. The best advice I can give is if you have someone on staff that has done this in the past or previously, enlist their help to get you through this. The the bad thing about this process, we only do it once a year. So it's not something that someone can learn during the year while they're working in an office. You pretty much have to be there when it's being done to understand the whole process.
Yes, ma'am, indeed. And you kind of touched on it a little bit right there. And here at BIS, we're trying to smooth that process out for TNT. But you being an expert in it and you're for so many years, kind of talk about some of the processes in the fact that y'all are trying to make it, or how do y'all try to make those processes easier year by year in doing TNT?
Well, when I started doing this, I kid when I talk about this in classes that I teach. We used to do this with a number two pencil, a big cheap tablet, and an eraser about the size of your desk, and adding machine tape that you could wrap around the world. Since that time, the calculations have become much more complicated. And luckily for us, there is software out there that you guys are creating and other offices that are other places are creating that help with the adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and all of the other complex complications that go into this process. So I would say some of the things that are helping are Excel spreadsheets, computer software, information that you can get almost instantaneously from both websites, from the appraisal district, things of that nature. So the process, even though it's become more complicated, at least now we are being able to we have resources at our fingertips much quicker.
Yes, ma'am. And now that the special sessions, the special legislative sessions are over, the changes that have been made, and all the bills that have been passed, has that had any effect on the truth and taxation processes, or will that have effect going into the future?
It does. We had several bills that were passed that don't go into effect until January the 1st of 2024. And just to relieve stress, I'm not even going to go into any of that because we have so many people out there that are actually trying to get this done as expeditiously as possible. However, for school districts, there was a major change that took place, or it's kind of, how can I put this? It's kind of like that movie Back to the Future. We're doing several things at one time and we're going backwards and forwards in this process. There will be a $100,000 homestead exemption if the voters approve a constitutional amendment in November. However, we've been instructed by the legislature to mail out our tax bills in October as if that $100,000 homestead exemption has already been approved, which would be creating what they call a provisional tax bill. And that $100,000 homestead exemption goes back to January the 1st. So we're looking at things that are going to be happening right now, that we're supposed to look at it as if it's going to go back to January the 1st. We'll mail out tax bills in October as if the constitutional amendment has already passed on November the 7th. And so you can see where that would cause not only the assessors to have concerns and questions, but when those bills are mailed out in October, the answers that they're going to have available for taxpayers who have questions about that system.
And so it seems that, again, y'all still have a lot of things up in the air right now. So for you personally, how are you trying to kind of slow that process down a little bit? Again, you don't know a lot right now because, again, there's still stuff to be voted on in November, as you said, and things that really won't take place or even be in effect until January of this coming year. So how do you personally, kind of take it slow a little bit to kind of ease the process of it, and also for the advice, and you kind of touched on it a little bit just a while ago, for the people that are kind of doing this for the first time, and again also just getting ready for another season.
Well, actually, this is my season. You might say, different parts of the tax process has its own season: appraisal season, protest season, creating tax bill season, and creating tax rate season. So this would be my Super Bowl. And this is where I'm trying to work as quickly as possible to touch base with people as quickly as possible, mainly because when I get an email or a phone call, it's because someone has a question, or they're being questioned by either their governing body or their auditor or their CFO. And so there's not a way to slow down the process. Our process is mandated by law, meaning that you're supposed to adopt a tax rate by September 30th. You're supposed to have public hearings. You're supposed to put notices out at a certain time. So there's really no slowing it down or stopping it, but trying to mitigate issues as they arise, and trying to educate and explain the process to as many people as possible, and to give very full and clear explanations to the questions that you get. And I think, to me, that's the best help I can give to the individuals out there that are trying to go through this process, is to try to respond to them as quickly as possible, but also to respond in a way that gives them understanding and clarity, because most of the time the people I respond to are having to answer to someone else for a question that was asked of them.
Yes, ma'am. Well, you talk about those rates. So, if the designated officer or employee has used a certificate estimate of taxable value to create the limit rates, when can a taxing unit adopt its rate?
Well, according to the tax code, and it is acceptable to create your worksheet and create your benchmark rates using that certified estimate of taxable value. However, the tax code does say that the governing body should wait until it gets its certified values before it actually adopts its tax rate. So there may be some lag time in between when your benchmark rates have been created and then when you can actually adopt a tax rate, which is not unusual. But in the meantime, you can use those benchmark rates to have your meetings and create your notices and keep everything on a timeline that is mandated by the state.
Well, Connie, you've taught me a lot here today on the podcast about TNT and the what all goes into it, and all the busy stuff that y'all are getting ready for here pretty soon. I know I've learned a lot. So before we kind of wrap things up, anything you'd like to say, or anything you would like to say to the people listening out there, just about kind of what we've talked about, and also for any further advice you'd like to give?
Well, I think let me just go back and kind of hopefully clarify something, or maybe add a little layer to something. This process, as again, it only comes once a year. I would always compare, if I was the person doing this, whether I've been doing it for 5 years or 2 years or even 1 year, I would be comparing my numbers from the previous year to the current year. And if I discovered what I call anomalies, things that are pretty out of whack, that are not the same as they were the previous year, I would question those things and try to get answers. And the way that I would question those things is I would ask whoever I got the information from. I would say, could you please explain to me why this number was so much higher last year and this year it's so much lower? And I'm not, criticizing the information that you gave me. However, I want to be enlightened so that when I am asked that question by my governing body or my taxpayers, I can have that answer available to them. I think communication between the designated officer employee, the appraisal district, and the governing body. These are all of the people, individuals, entities that are involved in this process. And I think a great communication with these industry people is probably the best advice I could give anybody that's doing this process at this time.
And that's why, folks, she is considered an expert in the field. Connie, thank you for joining us here today and talking to us about TNT. And again, we appreciate you so much, and just what you taught us here today. And hopefully, the people that are listening to this podcast today have learned a lot, because again, you are an expert, ma'am.
Well, I appreciate that. I think after almost 50 years of being in the industry and actually having done these tax rates at a time when I was a county tax assessor collector, hopefully my empathy for the individuals that are actually trying to attempt to do this, and I totally understand their stress, that one of my main goals is to alleviate as much of that stress as I possibly can, and to educate as many of the new people that are picking up this, and hope, to guide them and get them to where they're very confident in what they produce.
Yes, ma'am. Well, again, Connie, we thank you for joining us here today on the BIS podcast. Again, we call all our guests special when they join us on the podcast, folks, but Connie is a special one because she really knows what she is talking about. Again, Connie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Josh. I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome, ma'am. Again, anytime you want to come back, just call in and hey, we'll get you on.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Connie. Again, you've been listening to the BIS podcast, broadcasting live on the Marvin Network. We've been talking with Connie Rose on TNT and all that goes into it and the busy season ahead. Again, thank you so much, Connie, for joining us here today. And until next time, folks, so long and goodbye.